Well, as we continue to understand the gravity of the wildfires burning in Manitoba, you might have heard us referring to a wildfire in Ontario, in Gulf. And that is the fire that would have spread now into Manitoba, into the Whiteshell region. So a lot of Manitobans would have vacationed there and would have spent lots of their lives there. My next guest is one of those people on Long Pine Lake is where his family's cabin used to stand. In some of the most dramatic video to come out of these fires so far, firefighters from the water in a boat were shooting the shoreline of that lake. And as Ben Hopper put it, and when I talked to him, he said, I was waiting for the camera to go by and hoping my family's cabin would be there. And it was in flames. In fact, engulfed in flames, an A-frame cabin that was built by Ben Hopper's grandfather, now in ashes. As he put it, it was like, quote, witnessing a murder. It was really quite something for the family to watch it be lost. Well, Ben's father is Jim Hopper. He's 73 years old. He lives in near Sault Ste. Marie, and he joins us now via Zoom. Hi there, Jim.
Hi, how are you?
I'm better than you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I can see your emotion in your face as I was talking about how your son was describing this. Um, who shared the video with you?
Ben did. He
Yeah.
shared it with he shared it with all of us around 11 o'clock last night. We did confirm that the cabin was gone, but we hadn't seen anything. So it was a bit of a shock. And
Do you know when it actually burned down? Like when this happened?
well, I can only follow what I was reading from the news that Monday night, Tuesday morning. It appears to me that the camp next door, which was they were friends of ours, and they had since sold as well, but their camp was completely gone, and it looked by the direction of the wind that it probably ignited uh, the A-frame. So,
Yeah.
um, but it hadn't touched some of the pines that my mother planted about 50 years ago.
Wow.
So, but
This
some of them went, some of them did.
this cottage, your family, you've alluded to this, sold probably about 12 years ago or so. But tell me a
Yeah,
little bit
yeah.
about its origin because it's lovely the way you describe it. Your parents first, I think, went in a canoe on this lake.
Uh, yeah, my dad was an avid outdoors person, and my mom was. And funny enough, I was watching the fires, and Slave Falls was where they met, and they've shut down the hydro there. But anyway, they when they got married, they had their honeymoon at the Long Pine Lodge. Lil Hayes owned it at the time, and they paddled, and they fell in love with the lake. And over the next few years, I was born, and then after that, they found a double lot, and they paid $450 for it in 1964. And my dad was a great keeper of paper, so we had all of those bills. And he designed it and built it himself. He was not a carpenter, he was not an architect, but he did a fine job. And the final bill for materials was around $5,000.
Wow.
And so, and what was unique and was not available anymore were the white pine tongue and groove boards that made the A's, like between the beams.
Yeah.
They were just it was absolutely gorgeous wood. But and I think that's why it burnt so well.
How much of
So
your life did you spend out there, growing up, and how often were your parents out there after this labor of love was complete?
my mom took us out there for at least half a year. And then the other half was, school in town. So and for me personally, it's the reason I live here on the lake now, is that because I couldn't imagine any other place to live. So, um, but it,
How'd you spend your summers there? What'd you do as a young Jim on the
oh,
lake?
well, a young Jim was responsible for two younger brothers while they were building. And so I was in charge of cooking and cleaning up the breakfast. And then I'd keep them busy. One of the things we always laughed about was the fact that the tent caterpillars were an infestation during the year that we were building the actual frame and flooring. And so I kept them busy and entertained by throwing these caterpillars on the generator exhaust pipe. So, um,
It sounds like lake life. Worked at the store,
yeah, yeah,
used to run the water taxi, I think you shared.
yeah. And our next door neighbor, um, like I said, he passed away last year, but he and I worked at the store together, Brian Griffin, and we were a tight group. That was we're at the lake, and many, many, many great memories. It was the social life on the lake because of the camper association was amazing, and there was a regatta, and we had dances, and as I said to you before, you knew the place was rocking when the skunks would come out from underneath the dance floor, but that was the way it was then. And when we were young, we used to get, I think, 25 cents a piece for whitefish that we caught in the stream and gave to the railroad guys that worked there, and they would smoke them and eat them. So there was, and I think probably these days I would have been taken away from my parents, but they let me, I just go in the bush, gone, and take the dog, and away I go and come back later.
Yeah.
That was after the camp was complete. But
How
and one
long?
of the things,
Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead. I just wanted to say one of the major accomplishments that my father was proud of, other than, obviously built a beautiful place, but he always wanted a stone fireplace, and it almost killed us to do it, but it was built, and my children remember it fondly because they would go swimming in the evening, put on their PJs, and I'd play them some music while the fire, crackled, and they ate marshmallows and things like that. And one funny thing that happened that I always think about too was as it was being built, you could always hear people on the lake. They didn't really realize we could hear everything they said, and they didn't know what was going on. They thought it was a church. They thought they were building a church. So,
What was the size of it? And I mean, how long did it take to build, given that, as you said, your dad and mom weren't really builders. They just went into this.
yeah. Well, it because Ingolf was all boat access only, it had to be barged in. So, um, the concrete pads mostly were done there, I believe, and then the beams and the flooring all came as one. Um, I do remember we had a 56 Chevy Bel Air with a little trailer behind it, and the first thing my dad built was an outhouse. And he built it. We lived on Bronx Avenue in EK, and he built it in the garage, and it was the big hit of all the kids because it was a two-seater. So we would go in there and play, and so he took it apart. We hauled it out there. We had the most fancy outhouse on the block. So
It must have
it was
taken
great.
years to build. And
It
did,
it took it took if I recall, by the time we got it to where we could live in it, it was probably, I would say 4 years.
yeah.
Um, and I remember going downtown with my dad in our trailer, and they would demolish some of those buildings on in and around the old area of the market now. And we would, in those days, you could just walk in and we would pull out lumber and all kinds of things and fill the trailer, take it to the lake.
How
And
how a lot of Manitobans in that area, right?
yeah, there was the camper special was the train, and it went through from Winnipeg, carried on east to Kenora and beyond. But in those days, that's how the initial people populated the lake. They came out via the train, and then they rode down the lake.
What town did you
And
live in then in Manitoba?
pardon me?
What
Oh,
town
we
did
were in
you live in
Winnipeg.
then? You were in Winnipeg going to school and then
Yeah,
summers there. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. We were in East Kildonan.
So We have yet to contact the current owners, but I know that your mom, who is no longer with us, but your mom cared so much about that place that she was really careful for who she was going to sell it to, right?
Yeah, my mom was she was pretty passionate about it. She had a couple of people drop in and offer her money, and she talked to me and she said, "I don't like him. He's not going to get the place." And so finally, when the family showed up, the lights went on, and she knew this was the family, and they actually knew Brian and Linda Griffin next door. So it was great. And I think they had a long talk, and she was looking for someone who loved the white pine, who loved the fireplace, who just loved everything about the place, and they were just ooh goo, all over the place. And so she go, "Yep, okay, this is it." So she,
What given everything we've talked about them, what was it like for you to watch this video?
well, I think first of all, I felt very, very sad for the people who own it now, and that was my first thought, and it sat with me for a while because I don't know how they improved it or what they did, but my goodness, if we had only owned it that long and lost it, it would be just so devastating. But then I also was maybe not quite as extreme as my son in terms what his comments were, but it was as I watched it, um, it was like an old friend, and it was like I lost my younger brother's still alive, but I lost my brother and my mother and my dad, and so this was sort of a closure, I guess. And it was gone. So, but I do remember neighbors would joke that if a fire ever comes through, this thing will go up like a torch, and it did, and it's very, very sad. So.
Thank you for remembering the brighter days around this cottage that was so special to your family and built by your parents, Jim. I really appreciate you sharing the story.
Well, thank you for getting in touch.
Former Winnipegger Jim Hopper, apologies for my voice sounding different there. I spoke with him yesterday via Zoom in a different studio.